Hey there, friends on YouTube. Back again with the Painfully Honest Tech podcast. My name is Jason, sometimes known as the JTL. Painfully Honest Tech is the name of the channel and also the name of the podcast. We are joined, as always, by our co-host Adam from Tech Odyssey. If you don't know Tech Odyssey, then you got to check out Tech Odyssey because it's a great channel. There's links that you can get to. They're down in the description. And
I've watched my videos before, and I like them, so you'll probably like them too.
Yeah, it's highly worth checking out. So, you know.
And there's an Easter egg. Like I've had a running Easter egg for the last 4 years, where every year I have less hair in the front of my head.
Oh, never would have got
but
that.
only long-term watchers will catch that.
Yeah. I also have an Easter egg on my channel. 5 years ago, I had much more color in my hair overall. So
we'll see where the next 5 years takes us.
Yeah, I don't have much more color to lose, really.
I have a lot left to lose, and I don't.
It doesn't really matter. We've got faces made for radio. That's just how it is. But here we are on video.
That's what I used to put on my online dating profiles.
Face made for radio.
Great face for radio.
So, if you're not familiar with the podcast, here's what we do. We come on here every week and we talk about tech-related stuff, consumer tech, smartphones, and all that kind of stuff. And really, it's just whatever is sort of bothering us on that particular day. And today, there are several things that are bothering us, but we're going to start with the one thing that's been the talk of the Twitter since last night, and then continuing on today. Our friend Viper, host of the Tube Tech podcast, sponsored by vidIQ. Yes, Captain Team Apple, he says, and sometimes he does stuff that's not Team Apple. So
I have a hard time with that. I refuse to call him the captain of Team Apple. I think if you're the captain, you have to be exclusively Apple. So I think he's firmly in like the lieutenant of Team Apple category, because he does dabble with a lot of Android stuff, especially this year, like the Fold, the OnePlus Fold. Yeah. I'm like, I don't know. I feel like it's false advertisement.
He's got to work out his messaging. That much is clear. However, today he and our friend LeBaron Burton have been having this argument about whether or not So Viper points out correctly that the Apple Watch is the best-selling watch of all time, not just smartwatch, but watch. Like they've sold
not
more
even
watches.
All time, but all times.
Yes, like even before, like during the primordial soup phase of our existence, it was the best-selling Apple Watch, or best-selling watch. And LeBaron points out that might be all well and good. However, if you had the choice between, say, a Rolex and an Apple Watch, what would you select? It's an interesting question. Last I looked at LeBaron's poll, it was about 75-25 in favor of the Rolex.
And so that number inspires me, making me think there's still hope for humanity. But then there's also almost 30% of people that would choose an Apple Watch over a Rolex, and then that just takes my hope for humanity right back away.
Well, see, here's the thing for me. I'm not a big jewelry person. I'm not a big accessory wearer, I guess. And the Rolex like firmly falls into the category of like accessory jewelry. When you get up to that level, it's expensive. It's made of expensive materials.
It's a extreme luxury good is what it is.
But for me, like, there's not a lot of value in that for me. I would never buy a Rolex. I don't. And before the Apple Watch came out, I hadn't worn a watch in decades.
So I've historically wore a lot of watches, especially while I was in the military. I actually had this really cool watch that had a digital compass built in, which was very, very important because when I was in Iraq, we got mortared and rocketed a lot. And then we would have to call in the grid coordinates, and I could just look at my watch, and then I could shoot an azimuth, and it would tell me what direction it was, so I could get the reverse and call it back to our base defense operations center. I'm like, hey, it's like 270 degrees from my location. So, I mean, I've been wearing and using watches for a long time, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of utility in them. I don't like this argument. Like at face value, and my tweet was, if you would choose an Apple Watch over a Rolex, then you're brain dead, because you could take any Rolex and then you could go turn it in and sell it. You could take it to the pawn shop and get
Yeah.
enough to buy like 25 Apple Watches.
Yeah.
So
But that's
just to
not necessarily
say,
the spirit of the question, I guess.
it's
The
it's not.
spirit of the
I think the better question would be, if you had the opportunity to choose one to wear for free,
right.
which one would you pick? And maybe that would be a more realistic expectation. Because I think a lot of people would like the value of having a Rolex, but I don't want to wear one every day.
Right. See, I would pick, um, I would still pick the Apple Watch just because it has more utility to me. Now, maybe I would pick. There's not another smartwatch better than the Apple Watch. Okay, so
No.
amongst all smartwatches, there's no use in choosing another smartwatch over the Apple Watch, and a Rolex doesn't offer me the kind of value that an Apple Watch does.
I mean,
So
I have the Apple Watch Ultra. I wear it pretty routinely because Apple has seen fit to screw me out of the ability to use a external SD card with my iPhone here in the States. So I find myself using it more often than I would like to, which means I use my Apple Watch, but my heart certainly isn't there. But there was the whole thing that started this poll was an argument between LeBaron Burton, the king of popcorn himself, popcorn
yes,
world, and the man about tech. And what was said was LeBaron, whether he likes to instigate things,
yes,
and I condone this behavior. He said that the Apple Watch was the Toyota Corolla of watches.
yeah, yeah, and I mean that. So you can look at that on two different fronts. The Corolla, well known for being a reliable budget friendly choice of vehicle from Toyota. A lot of people, I said, to me, the Toyota Corolla is like the 25-year-old still working the starter job, uh, but needs to drive to work car. you know,
Well, they've always been good because they've had a lot of valuable things associated with them. They were fairly inexpensive as far as cars go, which on the first attempted recording of this video,
yes,
I was relating back to when I bought a Toyota Corolla back in the year 2004, and it cost $9,600 back then.
right, right,
And now it's 22,000 and like $50 or 23,000, whatever. It's
yeah.
basically it's way more expensive now. So thanks a lot, inflation.
Yeah, and it's kind of weird. Like, I don't think cars were as expensive pre-pandemic. Well, I know they
No,
were.
they were not.
Just like sometimes I play guitar. I like guitars. I watch guitar videos, and I'll watch a guitar video from like 4 or 5 years ago about a guitar that I can still buy new.
So
Four or
you'd
five
say
years
that
ago,
you like guitars.
yes, but
Okay.
4 or 5 years ago when the video was made, the guitar was like $1,800. However, like in current day, it's like $2,200. So there's some funkiness going on that is related to inflation and the after effects of the
Yes,
economy and the
but
pandemic and blah blah blah.
reg- even though
Regardless, yeah,
the Toyota Corolla is over $20,000 now, it is still considered to be a very reliable car, very still kind of entry level car, and it has a lot of good features. It gets great gas mileage. Toyota has an excellent track record, safest cars, long warranty. They
yeah,
run for a long time, and even now the new ones have some smarter features and stuff. So I I don't think it's entirely a complete backhanded compliment to say that the Apple Watch is the Corolla, because being a Corolla is not a bad thing.
yeah,
Like a Corolla is good, but it's hard when you try to equate the two, because one is a smartwatch and the other one is a car. And in the smartwatch world, like, it really is kind of like the Cadillac of smartwatches.
yes.
But in the grand scheme of things, the maybe the Corolla is not the it's definitely not the Corolla of cars,
And
or the Cadillac cars.
here's the problem I have with both sides of this argument, in that both men are putting forward a false equivalency or a false equivalence, right?
So a
The
logical fallacy.
this is a logical fallacy where the value of an Apple Watch is not the same value proposition as the Rolex, right? They may
they did
both
not
be
equate.
timepieces, but their value propositions and why people would buy them are different. So I don't think it's quite possible that there are many people out there who own multiple Apple Watches and multiple Rolex. But they didn't buy the Rolex because it was better than the Apple Watch. They bought the Rolex because it was a premium luxury timepiece,
Do you think
which
that
nobody has
person
ever accused.
also? Do you think that same person also has a Tag Heuer smartwatch?
Possibly. Possibly. There are people who collect watches, timepieces. They are very collectible. They're very valuable. They're symbols of wealth. And so I think that
I still have one.
Yeah,
I have this archaic dinosaur.
and I have no problem. Like one of the most useful and best selling watches still to this day is like the Casio DualShocks. I mean, people still love
The
those.
Casio Douche Shock.
DualShock,
Like,
yes. People still love those watches.
I,
And you can get them for like $30 at Walmart.
well, they have more expensive ones. So I actually bought one of those for my oldest son because it is still fashion item. Like people still like DualShock or the G Shocks, and like
Oh yeah, that's right. DualShock is a PlayStation controller.
yeah.
Okay, I see.
Sorry, pardon, we're old, but the G Shock. So the G Shock, a lot of people liked them for years. I never really cared for them. Like I didn't like the design. I was like, why am I going to pay this much for just a simple watch that just happens to be slightly more rugged and bulky? But they have more fashionable ones now. And I bought one for my oldest son for his birthday. I got it. I actually got it in Lisbon. So when I went to Mobile World Congress in 2023, I was there because Mobile World Congress is like the last week of February.
Right.
And I was traveling back on my son's birthday, which was March the 3rd. So I was like, it's kind of a thing. But I buy him something at the airport in Lisbon for his birthday, like when I'm in there every year. So this year was the G Shock. But anyway, it's a neat watch. But yeah.
Again, like I think that the Apple Watch has more in common DNA with the G Shock than it does with the Rolex. Honestly, I mean the G Shock
is digital.
It's a it's a multi-purpose device, right? It's a device that is not only meant to tell time, but it'll track your times, stopwatch, et cetera, et cetera. It's definitely like it's like a training wheel bicycle compared to the smartwatch that is the Apple Watch, but they share a lineage. I don't know if I would comfortably say that the G-Shock and the Rolex are like equivalent devices, one just more expensive than the other.
That's a really, really hard bridge to gap because one of them is like entry level $10,000-$15,000 and it's just like basically an analog. It's just a traditional mechanical watch with the Swiss movement, right?
Right.
And there's very limited functionality, especially some of them. They only tell time and have the date. That's all they do.
Right.
So it's hard in certain ways to look at that and go, why is this 15,000 when you get the Apple Watch Ultra, the one that wasn't banned for a day, the original one, Series 1, you could get it for like $600.
Yeah. Which as how would we? So if a Rolex or a Tag Heuer or something like that is a luxury timepiece, like kind of a piece of jewelry, then what do we call everyday watches? Do we just call them everyday watches? I mean, like a Timex. So if you compared an Apple Watch,
I guess just a watch. I mean, it's just a watch.
If you compared an Apple Watch to a Timex, which I think both are meant to be affordable by the average person. Then
in certain ways, yes.
The Apple Watch is vastly superior in functionality, although whether or not in terms of fashion you prefer the Apple Watch to a Timex or a G-Shock is...
You know what watch I'd like to have? I miss the old Game & Watch Mario watch. Yeah. I had one of those when I was a kid, and I thought I was just the coolest because I had that watch.
Yeah, I remember when I was in junior high and high school, Swatch watches were the big thing.
They made a comeback.
Yeah, I know. But I kind of can see an equivalence between the Swatch watch and the Apple Watch. You know, multiple bands, very fashiony, kind of forward thinking fashion wise in terms of what you're signifying to people. But I think going back to the idea of comparing an Apple Watch, even if it's the Apple Watch Ultra, to a Rolex, like the two things, tell time, right? But
fundamentally,
I would say,
yes.
and you can wear them on your wrist. But other than that, I don't think there's a lot of common ground between them.
No, there's not. I mean, it's almost like comparing an old Nokia brick to an iPhone.
Right.
Like they're just not in the same. They're not in the same league. They're not. I mean, they don't have the same real purpose, market, scope, or capability. They're just so different.
And you could make the argument that, like the old Nokia brick phones, their purpose was not to give you connectivity to the internet and everything else, right?
Like basic communication.
If they did that, they might give you some access to email. They might, they might give you access to text messages. They might give you a very, very rudimentary like web browser.
The AT&T ringtone store.
Yeah. But their purpose was not the same stated purpose as the iPhone. The iPhone was a paradigm shifting device, right? And you could kind of make the same argument that the Apple Watch was a paradigm shifting device in the sense that there had been smartwatches before. I remember the Pebble. I loved the Pebble. Had an E8 display.
I had that, and it was amazing because it was the only smartwatch that I could get to work with my BlackBerry 10 phones because they made it work with that.
Yeah. But, the Apple Watch is certainly to this point the, as you said, Cadillac of smartphones or smartwatches. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't, like, clearly on every other level, a Rolex is a superior timepiece. It's a superior.
It's more, it'll last way longer.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, when talking about how the Apple Watch is the best-selling watch of all time, that kind of speaks to the nature of buying an Apple Watch compared to the nature of buying a watch in the past.
I think that it's I understand that this is called a watch because you wear it on your wrist. Fundamentally, it tells time. But if you think about it, the point of having a watch really is just to pay attention to the time and typically the date and maybe have a chronograph. You can do some stopwatch stuff. But the entire purpose traditionally of a watch is to gauge time in some way, shape, or form. And
to watch the time, literally.
Yeah. This has a blood oxygen sensor. This has the ECG capability. It has the ability to send messages and communicate. I mean, maybe we need to reframe and change the context on what this product actually is. It's like a personal smart device on your wrist. It's not so much a watch.
I do think in the near future, the Apple Watch has the potential to take the reins over from the iPhone as being, in the Apple world, the hub of all your on-body communication and technology, right? I think,
it can play Doom.
Yes, yeah. But so I think that while it's kind of a fun argument, it does set up a false equivalence that is not real. You can't really say, well, it's the best-selling watch of all time, so it's better than a Rolex. You can't say that.
So I'm going to ask you the question.
Okay.
If you had the opportunity to receive one of these watches for free, but you had to wear it for the next year exclusively, which one would you choose? Apple Watch Ultra or any Rolex of your choice?
Still Apple Watch Ultra. Because if I have to wear it for a year, I mean, I'm not going to get nearly as much use out of a Rolex. I mean, a Rolex is something that I would like put in the drawer and hand down to my grandson.
If I were single, I would go with a Rolex.
Of course. I mean,
being a happily married man, this is more useful to me.
When you've got a face made for radio, you
You
have
need a
to
Rolex.
attract the the fairer, well, whatever you're trying to attract, you
A
have to use,
mate.
yeah, you have to use different bait. So I'm trying
So,
I'm trying not to go into any sort of unpolitically correct space there by saying whatever it is you're trying to attract, be it a raccoon or otherwise, Rolex probably the better choice.
yeah.
But but for me, there's more utility in the Apple Watch. It does more for me on a regular basis, and the only reason I own a watch period is because the Apple Watch exists.
I will tell you though, like I've never been enamored with Rolex. Honestly, I don't really like the design all that much. And there is a watch that I want though that has been on my bucket list for like forever, forever. And I really like Breitling watches.
Yeah,
And I want the Super Ocean 2. And it's a little bit more attainable. It's like $4,400 I've had an opportunity to buy one a few times, but I just can't bring myself to do it. One, it's heavy, and these old like big stainless steel watches are pretty stinking heavy. We take for granted that now with smartwatches are so light, but then you go put on a traditional watch. Like I have my Citizen Skyhawk here, and this sucker is like a brick
yeah.
compared to the Apple Watch Ultra even. But yeah, I never really would. I've never had an interest in Rolex, but I do very much enjoy smartwatches.
Yeah. For me, that's the whole thing. It's like this. There's just not much of a comparison between a luxury watch, something that, and something that is. And now Apple tried to make luxury Apple watches, but
And that
I
didn't work out
mean,
so well.
when you look at an Apple Watch in the context of like it costs $17,000, it's still an Apple Watch One, and it will be outstripped
Dead
by
in
its
4 hours.
its progeny by by leaps
Well,
and
it's
bounds.
interesting when you look at a Rolex. A lot of times, like what they're perceived as an investment. It's not
Yeah,
just a status symbol. It's not just a timepiece. It's looked at as an investment. It's
right.
traditionally over time they appreciate in value, whereas basically no electronics can say that they appreciate over time.
I mean, it has to be a very specialty kind of device. Like, we'll talk later about the cost of the Vision Pro and whether or not that cost is warranted. But in researching and discussing that topic, I went back and looked at like the Apple Lisa, which was the computer that came
Wow.
out from Apple the year before the first Macintosh came out from Apple. And the Apple Lisa, very limited run, it was kind of Steve Jobs' baby, cost $10,000 in 1983.
So that's
And
like $50,000 nowadays.
right. And it's $40,000.
Oh, you
But
adjusted for inflation?
yeah, well, you have to, right? I mean, if we just did a constant curve, it would probably be $50,000, $60,000. But it's inflation goes up and down, and so does
Well,
the.
I was curious. I was like, you actually looked up what the modern value would be for it.
I did, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and so it's kind of flatlined because over the past 4 or 5 years, because it's been relatively the same amount of money. I think the U.S. dollar has something, its value versus other. Anyway, so but I think if you went to buy an Apple Lisa today, it would be much more than $40,000.
Yeah, that's not going to be expensive.
Yeah, and it's not
It's a,
because it's useful. It's, I mean, it's not a computer of that vintage is not useful to the modern day person in any way, shape, or form. It is, again, sort of a showpiece more than
I got to
anything
tell
else.
you, I have been, I, I've had some interesting tech in my life, and talking about vintage computers, there was one particular computer that I had way back in the day. Hold on a second. It was a portable computer made by Compaq, of all people back in the day. They used to call them like briefcase computers because they would have a handle on the top of them,
Oh yeah,
and they weighed like 30 pounds. They were really heavy, but they were compact, and they had a screen. Like the keyboard would come off the front. They had a little like dot matrix screen that would pop up. It was like orange or green screen, monochrome.
Right.
And mine was a 286, and it had a 10 megabyte hard drive in it, and it had a 5 1/4 floppy drive. And I got that thing from somebody like when I was much younger, and I love the thing. I used to program Quick Basic on there.
Yeah, I remember my first computer. I used other people's computers in high school and college, and then my grandparents, so they had a store that sold shoes, and in the back they sold sewing machines, vacuum cleaners, and typewriters. Um, and those three things have been often sold together for all time. I don't know why, but they Brother and other companies started coming out with word processors, which had like a little fold out screen that was maybe like 2 to 3 inches
With
tall.
the typewriter.
Yeah, and with a typewriter deck, and then you just like type in your thing and it saves it, and all that kind of stuff. So that I use that, and then you can print it out afterwards. But that's what I had first. But then the first computer that I had that I could use in my own home was my then girlfriend, now wife's computer, which was an Apple Classic 2, which was
Oh, nice.
the rectangular box with the tiny
Our
little 9-inch screen or whatever it was.
our first computer we got when I was like 3. Like I learned how to type on DOS and how to
Right.
use a computer before like I could even read. Like I could do all the commands, and I could load up my one game on the 5 1/4 floppy. But it was a AT&T 8088 machine with a 14-inch green monochrome monitor, dual floppies, no hard drive.
Right. Right. And I mean, when we think about that, okay, so you can't make the argument that any of those devices are similar to a Rolex. However, they appreciate in value because of the place that they hold in everyday in the zeitgeist of like technology, right? I wanted to find this because I saw this last night and didn't take note of it, but in 2023, a first generation iPhone sold for $63,000.
Was that the one that was sealed in the box?
I think so. Yeah.
It's
Yes.
crazy that how much a sealed in box item, even though you could find one like equivalent, maybe never used, just because somebody opened it, the extra value of it being still sealed. It reminds me of whenever I was like a kid. It was you would sometimes buy toys and you would keep them in the box because you're like, this is going to be worth $1 million one day, and
Yeah. The best example of that being the original Star Wars action figures.
Mhm.
So there were two different runs of the Star Wars action figures, and the second run had changes, and they were the ones that sold the most. But the first run, that was sort of made in a hurry for Christmas season 1977, was I think it was a run of like 11 action figures,
Mhm.
and like the Han Solo famously was like it just looked like it looked like a piece of clay stuck on a body. Like the head was just ridiculous. It kind of looked like Ringo Starr, to tell you the truth. But that Han Solo was, because they changed the design later on, the original one that was a limited run became very, very sought after. And when my in-laws were moving in the early 2000s, my mother-in-law went into her attic and she found a bag from like what a Kmart or whatever store that she was shopping at for the holidays, and
Kmart sucks.
well, yeah, it could have been Woolworth or Woolsworth or whatever, yeah, but wherever you shopped in the 70s, and and she had bought. I guess what happened was she had bought the like as many of those action figures as she could get, right, and then she had hid them in the attic, and then she forgot that she bought them, so she bought them again. So there were new in box, like almost the whole gamut of that original run, new in box, and
It's crazy.
yeah, and we did get the Han Solo that is worth a bunch of money, but it's the kind of thing. It's like, well, do you sell that? I don't know. Like, so we still have it in. I think it's in our safe deposit box.
That's pretty
So
cool.
yeah, but yeah, at the end of the day, I think that for me, I feel like it's not a valid comparison. Maybe the Apple Watch is the Corolla of watches, but the Cadillac of smartwatches.
Yes,
and
they can be mutually exclusive at the same time.
Yeah.
Like both things can be true.
But the value proposition of an Apple Watch and the value proposition of a Rolex are not the same thing.
No, not at all.
So they have some things in common. They are both called watches, but they are not the same.
That's kind of like the Taco Bell argument. Like, people like Taco Bell, but it's not really Mexican food.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing with Chinese food. Chinese food is like, I can't remember which of the words that they use for Chinese food, like generalized Chinese food, maybe it's Szechuan, I don't know, means in Chinese literally like garbage food. So
I can get jiggy with that.
Yeah. So but I know from working in a Chinese restaurant, the cool thing about that was when you work nights at a Chinese restaurant, usually a Chinese restaurant, at least at that time, would be open for lunch and then would close in the afternoon and then open for the evening around 4:00. Right. And so they had a lunch buffet, and if you worked at lunch, you could go out after the shift was over and eat from the buffet. But if you worked in the evening, after the store closed, the cooks would make a Chinese meal for everybody who was working to eat before they went home. And that Chinese food that they would make was wildly different than what they would make, off of their menu. And
I can relate to that.
Yeah, it was much less like greasy, heavy breaded, and more vegetables, lighter, like sautéed meats as opposed to like breaded meats and all that kind of stuff. So it was really good. And I think that's where we are. Like, you wouldn't compare, Chinese cuisine that is traditional to Chinese fast food, right?
General Tso's chopsticks is not the same thing as like real
Exactly.
Chinese food.
Yeah. I mean, although they did make General Tso's one time, and it was way different. It still generally tasted the same, but something about it was way different, and I only ate it that one time, and it's like I've been searching for that flavor.
You should write a song about that. Sounds like it's really special in your heart.
It was very, very special. So I think if we can interject ourselves into Viper and LeBaron's argument.
I did that already earlier.
Yeah, I did too. Well, I told Viper, I just basically commented, Viper, look up the phrase false equivalence bias and then come back to us when you fully understand like what it means. But
I was a little less diplomatic. I said anybody who would pick a Apple Watch over a Rolex was brain dead.
Yeah, I can see that. But I don't think that anybody's ever going to mistake an Apple Watch for a Rolex
until Rolex makes one.
Well, yeah.
Do you think they'll do that? Like, I know Tag has a smartwatch, and I think some other luxury brands like Movado has one. But we've yet to see one from like an Uber Elite. Like, I don't think Breitling has one. I don't think Omega has one, and certainly Rolex doesn't have one at this point.
Well, so the question is, why is the Apple Watch successful when other smartwatches have not been as successful? And the answer is because of the thing that Apple does better than anybody else, which is makes products that work seamlessly with their other products, and each product adds value to the other product. So Rolex only makes watches, right? So if Rolex made a smartwatch, it would be less likely to have as much value in terms of usability.
Mm-hmm.
Because who knows, like, you have to be able to pair it with whatever phone you have, because Rolex isn't going to start making a phone. They're not going to build their own operating system. They're not going to, make their own software. So I think that's a good place to kind of like to stick a pin in it, because Rolex is never going to be the king of the smartphone or the smartwatch industry, and Apple is never going to be the king of
the luxury watch industry.
The luxury. Yeah. So, but they can both be the kings of their respective places.
Kingdoms.
I mean, we could argue whether or not Rolex is that, but Rolex is kind of the de facto brand that people put up when they're talking about a luxury timepiece, right?
Well, I think also in the spirit of Rolex, we can roll on and discuss some of the next topics that we had for this wonderful show and our audience today.
Well, we wanted to talk about you can now reserve your spot to order a Galaxy S24 of your choice.
And, I have a hard time. This whole reserve thing is reserve your pre-order. So basically, you're setting yourself up the option to have a guaranteed opportunity maybe to get a phone. But the thing is, you can buy one regardless. Like they're not going anywhere. Like
you could go to Best Buy or your carrier store or wherever you want to go that sells the Samsung phone and get one day one.
Yeah, maybe this is just
maybe if you want to get that specialty color that they always do every year, and you want to secure your place for that. I don't know.
Well, there are a couple of reasons. So the reserve your pre-order, which I'm sure one of us will have a link down in the description.
Yes.
But you can click on that link and you can go to the splash page, and all you have to do is put in your first name and your last name. Honestly, you could probably put in somebody else's name if you want, but you need to put in your email. So that way you can get the notification for it. And what that does is you will get $50 of Samsung credit towards extras if you follow through and pre-order one of the phones from Samsung. So, I mean, you get freebie, so that kind of incentivizes you to come back and actually buy it from Samsung if you so choose to go that route.
Right.
There are other benefits to buying from Samsung, though, which I shall enumerate thus.
Okay.
One being that they have the exclusive colors. Yes. So they have the regular colors, but traditionally they have one or two special colors that you can get only from Samsung, which sometimes are cool. Two, you can get Samsung Care through them, which is the best way, I think, to get a extended service plan for your watch or your phone or whatever. And a lot of times it's discounted. So recently when we had the Z Fold 5, Z Flip 5, if you got Samsung Care, they were giving it half off.
Right.
So that was an incentive. They've also, for the last year or two, doubled the storage. So if you pre-order, they will give you the 256 for the price of the 128 or the 512 for the price of the 256. Yep. And those traditionally have extra RAM with them. So there's a benefit there. And also, best way to trade in a phone. And on top of that, a lot of people don't understand this. If you go to Apple and you say, okay, I promise to send in my iPhone 14 to get the iPhone 15, they will tell you how much they'll give you for it. Right. But they charge you full price up front. And then when you send it in, after they evaluate it, they will give you a credited refund back to your payment method.
Unless you're on the hook for the Apple Store.
Yeah, you can go straight to the Apple Store and do it there. But with the whole mailing it in thing with the different carriers, like Google does this too. Samsung, they take the risk up front. If you let's say you're going to get $11.99 Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra, and let's say they're going to give you $800 trade-in credit for your S23 Ultra, where you just trade that in. This is just hypothetical. If you indicate you're going to trade that in, they charge you the difference. So you only have to pay the $300 up front instead of the full $11.99, and then you have 2 weeks once you receive your phone to send the other one in, and then they will verify it, and then you'll be good. So there's a lot of reasons why it's beneficial to get it from Samsung if you choose to buy one. Now, not encouraging you to go buy one. I'm not a salesperson, neither is Jason, but just I always buy them from Samsung because I think it's the best way to go about it.
I mean, I think the one thing that we can say about hearing about this stuff from us is that sometimes we are privy to this stuff before other people are, and so we can kind of use affiliate links and clue you into stuff. But like, I haven't used the Samsung S24 anything yet, so I can't say whether or not it's something that you should buy. But if it's something that you want to buy, then
there you go.
And if you just want to reserve your spot,
there's no commitment.
There's no commitment other than giving them your email, which really, if we're honest, is probably the value to Samsung of this like reserve program, right?
But the great thing is you could make a spoof email. You could use your mother-in-law's email. I mean, however you can get access to it. Like you could use. I mean, you don't have to use. Everybody has a throwaway email.
Yeah, for some reason I don't, which is stupid. I should, but I don't.
So what you're saying is you just don't read my emails.
I don't think you sent me any emails.
That's neither here nor there.
Okay, but yeah, I think that Samsung just want lead generators. You know, it's the same thing as when you go to the mall, and maybe this is just Midwestern malls. You go to the mall and you see that nice John
Deere tractor.
John Deere tractor, the green tractor, and it's got that little box to the side, and it's got the card that you fill out, and you fill out the card and you put it in with the chance to win the tractor. That's lead generators for whoever bought that tractor. It's usually a vacuum company like Rainbow or Kirby. I used to sell Kirby, so I know all about this.
So I have a Rainbow.
Do you?
I do,
Yeah.
and I spent like $3,000 on it. But I will tell you, it's the best vacuum I've ever had. We've been using it for a decade, and it is a wonderful, wonderful piece of equipment. So,
No,
I mean, I did get suckered. Well, my wife suckered me because I was at home. I was at home one day. I was just taking a nap, as I did because I'm a hard-working man. And there's a knock on the door, and then my wife kindly invites this vacuum person into our house. But honey, it's such a great deal.
It was a cold door knock,
Yeah.
and you let him in.
No,
And they
my
sold
wife
you
let
a-
him in.
And they sold you a vacuum. Now
They
that's man, that's
Well,
some hardcore selling right there.
My wife let him in, and then my wife was sold on this vacuum, and I was just the payment method.
Yeah, yeah. I sold Kirby's for a summer when I was in college, and yeah, those little cards. I mean, so this is what Samsung's doing. They're using this reserve program to be the same thing as those little cards that you fill out at the mall to try and win the tractor. Here's the thing: somebody might win the tractor, but you're guaranteed to get a call from whatever entity sponsored that, right? And
It's true.
here's what they say. They've got people who make these calls. It's probably automated at this point. I don't know how they do it now, but when back in the day, one of the people who worked the phones would call up and say, "Hey, this is so and so from Kirby. We sponsored a giveaway for a tractor. You didn't win a tractor, but you did win your choice of steak knives, a silver serving tray, or a demonstration of the Kirby vacuum, and and a free rug. Our thing was a free rug shampoo.
So we also had a Kirby, and that one was thanks to my mom. And I remember my dad was pretty pissed because this salesman comes by and we're eating dinner. It's like 5 o'clock on like a Friday or whatever, and dude just knocks on the door. And if you ever have a door-to-door salesman that shows up at your door nowadays, especially like 5 o'clock in the evening, somehow or another, it is a vacuum.
Man, I tell you what, I don't answer the door ever. And now that I got like Nest Ring cameras, whatever they are, I'm just like, who is it? No.
Well, my mom got suckered into the Kirby, and then my wife got suckered into the Rainbow. So I've had the full gambit of family suckerage on vacuums.
Well, the thing is, as you said, and now, so I grew up, my grandfather sold vacuum cleaners. I mean, they were retail vacuum cleaners, Hoovers, and that kind of thing. So I was around vacuums when I was a kid. He repaired them as well. But when I did my training and learned about the Kirby, I was like, okay, it's 1991, and this vacuum costs like $1,500 base.
Oh yeah,
without
but
all
my
the
parents,
attachments.
I think my parents financed that Kirby for like 10 years or something.
Yeah.
Like they were paying like $40 a month for
It's
a
like
decade.
buying a car. It's like buying a
Oh.
car. But I swear, like, it really was the best vacuum cleaner I'd ever seen. And ever since, like, we had a Kirby when we lived back in my hometown that I'd gotten from the store. I told the guy who ran the store, the manager, I was just like, hey, we don't have a vacuum at my apartment right now. Do you have one that we can borrow? And he's like, oh yeah, go down in the basement and just grab one of the trade-ins. So in the basement of the Kirby shop, there was like 100 old Kirby's just sitting down there. And, I just grabbed like one of the more recent models that had, that wasn't the newest model that had been traded in, took it home. My mom used it. So that was 1991. My mom used it until probably about 2002 12 or 13 when she could no longer push it.
So,
So
so you know this. The Kirby's back in the day, you basically had to have Hulk Hogan arms to push them through any
yeah,
thickness of carpet. We had one when I was a little kid that apparently my parents got as like a wedding gift. It was one
right.
of the like original ones. And then what sold my mom was back in the 90s, we got the one with the automatic drive.
The one that I sold I think it was the Genesis. It was the original one that had the self-propelled motion. So
You weren't
that
selling these in Texas, were you?
no, no.
Okay, just making
I
sure.
was selling them in West Virginia, and yeah, I've got a lot of stories about selling vacuum cleaners.
All right, we'll save that for our podcast.
Yeah,
The Kirby Tales.
but I know that you've studied the rumor mill about the S24s, and you have somewhat of a unique take this year, perhaps, on what you think people should consider if they're buying an
So
S24.
I felt almost remotely proud today because usually I offend people with my opinions. But I made a video today saying pass on the S24 Ultra, maybe get the S24 Plus. Now, I have been very critical, hypercritical even, of the S22 Plus, the S23 Plus, because they charge $1,000 for it, but it had the LTPS screen, like it didn't have the LTPO, it didn't throttle all the way down to 10 or 1 hertz. It doesn't have a macro camera. It doesn't have the super zoom. It doesn't have the big 108 or 200 megapixel camera. It didn't have a 5,000 milliamp battery, 1080p screen. So a lot of these things were kind of frustrating to me that they would charge that $1,000 for that phone
Yeah,
when you could get that in both any other phone for $600.
yeah,
So unless it's an iPhone, which of course it wouldn't have those, and it would have a 60 hertz screen. But the iPhone
which
is
is
kind of like
another
a
argument.
smartphone.
You know,
So the S24 Plus is going to have, from what we've seen, basically like a 4,900 milliamp battery. So we'll round it up to 5,000. And it's going to have an LTPO screen, brighter. I think it's going to have some sort of upgraded cameras. At least I hope so anyway. It's still not going to have the bigger camera. But I don't think a lot of people care that much at that point.
right?
Flat screen, Snapdragon 8 Generation 3 is supposed to have 12 gigabytes of RAM, just like the Ultra. So they're kind of sprucing it up a little bit. And where basically the big thing is it's a little bit thinner, a little bit lighter than the Ultra. It doesn't have the S Pen, but it's roughly $200 less.
Right.
And I think that's much more palatable, especially with Quad HD Plus screen. All those things I would typically look for in a normal flagship non-Ultra phone at the $1,000 price point. I think it much more closely aligns with that and justifies the price tag. So a lot of people, well, some anyway, don't necessarily like the boxy design of the Ultra. They don't necessarily like the S Pen. They don't necessarily want to spend the extra $200 for features they don't care about. So I think that the Plus may be kind of like the Cinderella story for that phone lineup this year. I think it'll probably sell better than it has done previously, but it might be a better phone for some folks where you can save a couple $100.
Yeah, it's an interesting proposition because it's almost kind of the argument between like the S or not, the iPhone, like the Pro Plus, the Pro Max version versus the Pro version. You know, not everybody wants a giant phone. Not everybody, you know, they're virtually the same phones. I think that the Pro has from a from one time or another they've had slightly different features in the camera and stuff like that, but for the most part,
Basically, yeah, and like this year, the 15 Pro. I mean, essentially the only difference is that it has the 3 times telephoto instead of the 5. Like it didn't
right,
get the upgraded camera, but everything else, I mean, apples to apples, pun intended, is essentially the same.
right, yeah. I mean, I like the S Pen. I was always a Galaxy Note fan, and yeah, in fact, I used to get a lot. I used to cover the Note quite a bit, which
Well,
you know now I don't do as much Samsung stuff, and partially because that one phone that I liked and their flagship phone have kind of become the same phone.
I think there's two different parties. So if you are a Note fan, people like the new Ultra because it's effectively the Note. But if we remember back just a few years ago, there was a distinct Galaxy S line with an Ultra, and then there was the Note series.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of frustrating for some folks because I never really liked the stylus all that much. I would typically use the S series, and it was more rounded design, slight differences here and there, maybe a little bit cheaper, but ultimately it wasn't. it wasn't the Note, but you
Right.
still got the big full size Ultra. And then we lost that once the Ultra and the Note line merged, because now you're just buying the Note, right?
Yeah.
And then if you want the lesser model, there were a lot of compromises, and there. I think a lot less compromises this time.
Yeah, I think you could just make the argument that they took away some of the good features, or like they know the Plus was what the Ultra would have been, but they lessened it to a point where you didn't feel comfortable paying the money that they were asking for it, right?
I felt like it was kind of almost like there to incentivize people to buy the Ultra, because you're like, well, you get this at 1,000, but if you just pay that extra 200, look at all these extra things you get.
Mm-hmm. No, it's true, it's true, and yeah, I don't know, I think I think Samsung's kind of been in the weeds since this whole like merging of the Note and the S lines, and not people aren't. I okay. Here's my feeling of when it comes to. I don't think people are as excited about the. I don't think people are as excited about the Fold, like the Galaxy Fold, as they were about the Note. And so
In
the
the
Galaxy,
words of the
the
great Weezer, say it ain't so.
well, the Note was a very popular line of phones. I mean, I think it only became less popular because phones got bigger, and that was one of the Note's big features, pun intended.
Well, my suggestion was that when they created the Fold, it felt to me like the logical progression with what the essence of the Note was. So I thought they should just call it the Note and then just use the regular phone as the Ultra or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, no, that
Because they lost that name, and that name carried so much.
and maybe they only so the first Fold did not have S Pen support, and
No,
so
neither did the second.
when it ultimately got the S Pen support, I think the maybe calling it the Fold ship had, or maybe calling it the Note ship had sailed. You don't want to go back and call it something that it wasn't called. You know what I mean? But that would have been a nice transition. Like, we're transforming the Note into the next. That's a good story to tell. We're transforming the Note. It was the biggest phone that you could get at one time. Now it's going to be the biggest phone that you can get again. But
They
it's
could have
it's
called
going
it
to
the
do
Z
this
Note.
thing. Yeah, yeah. So I think I just think that Samsung's like Samsung's I guess narrative of their phones has been a little confused since the Note went away and the Fold came about. You know,
It has, but I think though, I think the Plus will be a much stronger consideration for a lot of people this year,
right?
or at least I will be discussing that on my channel. But the Ultra should be good too, and I actually have some concerns when it comes to the Ultra. And I made a video the other day saying that the S24 Ultra was either going to kill the Google Pixel 8 Pro or it was going to redeem it,
Right.
because you and I were talking just yesterday about how there's a lot of skepticism with AI.
Right.
There's distrust with AI. There's skepticism about how good it actually is. Does it do what it's supposed to, or what we believe it's going to do? Like, what kind of capabilities do we have on
Yeah.
phones?
Yeah.
So the Pixel 8 Pro is supposed to be the smartest smartphone, and it's supposed to do all these cool AI things. But some people are like, oh, well, it doesn't do all of it on the phone. Some of it's kicked off to the cloud, or who cares about Magic Eraser? I can do that with an app on my iPhone. So I don't think a lot of people really have bought into this idea of AI on smartphones. So Samsung is coming along. They're already calling it like the AI phone and
Yeah.
Samsung AI, and like, so they're either going to show up with their Snapdragon 8 Generation 3, and they're going to prove that AI is a legit thing with their phone, or they're going to show up and it's going to do the same thing that Google does. They're just going to copy it and just keep doing the same old. In which case, they're going to give they're going to give Google a lot of credit.
So here's what Samsung has. Again, I come back to the idea that Samsung has had a lot of trouble with like messaging, like telling people what their product is and how it works and what it does and why they want to use it. And perfect example of that is Bixby, right? Because Bixby is a much more integrated smart assistant when it comes to what you can do with Bixby on the phone. And there was a lot of functionality that Bixby had that other smart assistants didn't have, that Samsung could never communicate. They couldn't communicate why it was better or different or anything like that. And now they're doing this AI thing, which again, people don't people maybe have a little bit better understanding now of what this new wave of AI is than they did at the beginning of 2023.
Well,
However, I don't think they have a real understanding of why AI would be valuable to you on a smartphone.
the AI revolution that we've experienced over the last 8 months, it reminds me of when the race for and proliferation of 5G. Like
Right.
whenever 5G first came out, it was supposed to be so
And it gave us COVID.
revolutionary. Yeah, and it gave everybody COVID, and it was supposed to change everything, right?
Right.
Cars would be connected. You wouldn't run over people in intersections because the high-speed internet connection would tell the car that it needed to slow down. Like all these things, and then it's like you're still sitting here with 4 bars of 5G, getting the same 2 megabytes downloads and like the crappy connection that we experienced with LTE. So I know there's lots of levels of 5G. We've got ultra wideband, we've got sub 6 5G, we've got millimeter wave, we've got C band. Like there's all these different bands. So,
Yeah.
but it took like 6 years to start even realizing some of this 5G dream.
And I don't even really think that the 5G that has like expanded out to coverage in more places than it was. I don't think that's the 5G. I think the 5G that will change like the way that, I mean, there are more cars with static internet connections through wireless all the time now, and and that kind of thing. But I think when we get the super fast 5G, that will be when the change comes. But the problem with super fast 5G is that those 5G antennas are like their
Well,
range
they
is
sold us a story because
yeah,
they came out with millimeter wave and they're like, oh my gosh! Like remember they flew Motorola flew a bunch of people to
yep,
Chicago and you
yep,
had Mr. Mobile and everybody there and they're coming out and they're preaching, oh my gosh, I just got a 1,000 megabyte per second download, but then and then everybody's like, oh 5G 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 is going to be so amazing. But once it got out into reality, people realized, oh, millimeter wave only goes like 100 feet from the tower, and basically it's in Chicago and New York City
yep,
in certain blocks. So
yeah,
it's like the 5G we got. It reminds me of those pictures like on Reddit, the PG ones, where like the what you get versus the expectation
yeah,
versus
yeah,
reality.
yeah,
And so you see the box for like the casserole you got at the grocery store, and then you take it out and microwave it, and it just looks disgusting.
yeah,
Like that's
yeah,
what 5G was in America.
yeah. No, it's I always think of things like that in terms of pizza. Like you look at the Domino's pizza that they show you on TV, and you're like, man, that looks good. I better get into my app and order up. And then the Domino's pizza that shows up is like the cheese is all to one side, half the crust is bubbly, and they got the order wrong.
And there may be cigarette ash on it.
Yeah, but I mean, ultimately, I think the thing that I realized, this was just yesterday as I was looking up, those costs and everything, and doing the translation between, $500 in 2007 versus $500 in 2023, whatever. The way that this kind of AI is going to first help us, and we might not even realize it, is that when you get to a search box in your phone or on your desktop or whatever, instead of having, you're old enough to have had to do this, like learning how to do searches so
Oh
that you
yeah,
had the right contextual
and,
cues
and
to
the
get the
the
thing that you were looking.
asterisks and the
Yeah,
quotations and
yeah. Now
so
it's almost conversational.
a
You
lot of
can
people
say,
don't realize how much AI is already built into what they're doing. Basically, it just creates a lot of shorthand and it helps us get to where we need to be. I mean, what your instance is, you can just kind of vaguely type in something, and then your search results like, "Are you looking for this?"
Yeah.
And then you could click on that, which I appreciate because with autocorrect, the search result AI and then combined with the terrible autocorrect on Apple is like a godsend
Yeah.
because somehow it deciphers what I tried to text that didn't end up being what it was supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's going to be things like that that AI is able to make more possible. Like, so if we talk about this all the time, if what we're looking at with AI in terms of our phones or our communication devices, that is that on some level, Google Assistant or Siri will turn into Jarvis from Iron Man, right?
And that'll be
That
nice as long as he doesn't turn into Ultron.
yeah, exactly. But this is the first. This is like the baby steps toward that, where you can use contextual language. You can just say, I think one of my searches was how much was the first iPhone in 2007, and then it like actually when you use AI in like a Google search now, it'll highlight it'll give you the highlight of the article that it found that most matched what you were asking. So you don't even have to go into the web page, right?
Well, the AI now is like what. Remember whenever the Google Assistant and Siri first came out, and you would ask it something, and it would just
Yeah.
never give you the answer because
Yeah.
it just didn't work. Well, now what we're getting with the smartest, what we get with AI is when we're typing in these questions, it's basically giving us the answers we expected to get with smart assistants 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Right. Right.
But a lot of this is there's different types of AI. So there's contextual AI, there's image AI, there's uh, generative AI, where they just do different things and they have
Yeah.
different models. So Google has their own models. They have one for images, they have one for language, they have one uh, for the generative stuff. And what they do is they've compiled. It's basically probably a mountain of if then requests to where it can
Right.
answer your question. Like they've accumulated so much data from people asking questions, getting results, and Google's like 25-year history, 30-year history of fulfilling these requests, and they sandwiched it into this digital assistant
Right.
where it can kind of predict what it is you're asking for
Yeah.
whenever you ask for it, or it might can create it. And I think there's this there's a broken link here because whenever we first got AI stuff at the beginning of this year, it was generative AI. We've had contextual AI for a long time.
Right.
You look at your smart assistant, you look at the call assistant, you look at like there's things that your phone or your computer can do to kind of help you out. But this generative AI is what really has caught everybody's attention because you could type in a prompt and it'll give you an essay.
Yeah.
Oh, or you can type it. What's cool is not just type in a prompt and get an essay. You can say, I want you to write me a 500-page essay in the style and voice of Mark Twain.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it'll write it just like him. Or you can do things like, here, help me write a book, and
Yeah.
it'll help you write it. Or you can say, hey, I want you to create an image of like a mountain scenery with the sunset, with snow-capped mountains, and a hellcat between them,
Yeah.
and it'll create these things.
Yeah.
So that's what got people excited because they're like, okay, now I can ask it to do something and it will give me something.
Yeah.
And that's what's making everybody excited.
And I think that once that stuff starts to happen on your smartphone, it's going to be people who complain about AI on a smartphone is like it can't do everything on the phone. I mean, Google Photos, like the Pixel photos, have been like ever since they got that composite photo thing going. All that processing was done off the phone and sent back to the phone, right? And so, what do they call that?
You talking about computational photography? Or are you
Computation.
talking about Magic
Compu-
Eraser?
Computational photography. So I forget, like, was it with the first Pixel or was it like Pixel 2 or 3? I can't remember.
Pixel
Um,
3 was the first one that introduced computational photography, but almost akin to that in the same vein, AI kind of started to be built out back then because remember with voice to text.
yeah.
I think voice to text was one of the best early illustrations of how we were using AI, and it was cool when it worked, but if you didn't have a reliable high-speed internet connection on your phone, it would just sit there and spin and wouldn't do anything because the phone itself was not powerful enough to process that request. It would send it to the server, and it was mostly seamless if you had good internet.
Yeah.
But if you didn't have internet, then it just wouldn't work. And that was one of the big things. I think it was the Pixel 5. Pixel 4, Pixel 5 started with on the phone voice to text, and that really was a big deal because everybody else was years behind in that department.
Yeah, and it's interesting since Samsung is advertising this as like the AI phone, right? That's basically like their little splash page when you go to their website to do this.
Yeah, AI.
Yeah. And I've had some people on Twitter and elsewhere sort of say, well, I've got the S22 or I've got the S23 and I don't really want the AI thing. So I'm not interested. And to me, like, okay, I get it, but I think those kinds of reactions are based out of like a misunderstanding of what the AI is. Like, you're not going to be carrying Skynet in your pocket.
Well, I think a lot of people look at it from maybe an intrusion or like Big Brother using your phone, which of course they're already doing that anyway. Minus the AI.
Yeah, like that kind of assistive technology has been in your phone forever. You give your phone permission to listen to everything that you do, like from day one when you go through the EULA, right?
Uh-oh. Yeah.
so if you didn't realize that you were giving your phone permission to listen to your every move and all that, I mean, otherwise, how would Siri work? How would Google Assistant work? Like those things have to be listening all the time in order for them to work.
How would Rolex know to send you a push notification when you get home after you walked by their store to buy one of their watches?
Exactly.
Like capitalism is built on stealing information.
It's not at this point. I think it's really hard to make the argument that like, oh, I don't want people tracking my every movement. I mean, you're carrying your phone. It's got a GPS transmitter in it. like people are going to be like it's possible,
Yeah, and if you ever do anything,
you're not going to go off the grid, right?
No, as long as you have a phone. And it's funny too because a lot of people, and as much as you're a true crime enthusiast, and also we pay attention to tech, that sometimes your phone can be, I mean, don't do anything illegal, but it gets a lot of people caught when they do illegal things because they're like, oh, we know you were here. You're like, oh, my alibi was I was with Dave over at Chick-fil-A whenever this happened, and they're like,
right.
No, we have your phone at the crime scene.
At the crime scene. Well, I mean, the most recent, probably most well-known version of this is the guy that they arrested for the Idaho co-ed killings, right? He lived a town over from where they were, but he cased that neighborhood multiple times at like odd hours, and then the day of the murders, he drove his car to like the edge of that town, then turned off his phone, and then went and like the exact time frame matched up with like when his phone went off and when his phone went on, and so they were able to kind of like recreate the timeline of the events based on his movements, right? And even worse than that, there have been people who have been caught doing something they said that they couldn't do, said they had an alibi for, said there was no way they could have done it, but the GPS built into the computer in their car. I mean, you like, so the lesson here is, if you own a smartphone, if you use a social media account, if you sign on to the internet in any way, shape, or form, you are being tracked.
Like a million different ways from Sunday.
Yeah. I mean, just signing on to the internet and putting your digital fingerprint, that IP address, that digital fingerprint into the pool of every other IP address out there in the world, you're being tracked.
Yeah, okay? So this isn't an AI thing.
No. And so being nervous about AI like spying on you is not what you should be nervous about. I mean, this is what you should be excited about, this part. because now it's going to do you some good, as opposed to only assisting the people who want to make money off you. So,
yes,
I think that there's going to be, I think people are going to have to see it in action. They're going to have to like come to a better understanding of what it is, what it means, and then allow themselves to parse it out in some way.
Well, I think it's a lot of stuff that's been done with AI, even already, people don't realize is happening.
Yeah.
So if you take a look at the Google Pixel phone, just starting with the Pixel 3, the computational photography, the night sight, photo unblur, magic eraser, the speech to text, or you can send a voice message to somebody and it'll convert it from speech to text. The call assistant. One thing that really has improved AI this year, well, AI has enhanced. If you have an Android smartphone, then more than likely you can't use Face Unlock to get into your banking apps because Android requires a certain level of security that the Face Unlock technology can't do. But the Pixel 8 and 8 Pro do, because the AI enhancement on top of the security layer makes it secure enough that you can actually do that.
Right.
So there's a lot of things that people are like don't even realize is being enhanced or is functioning because of AI.
Yeah, and I think because AI has been a trope in popular fiction for the past 40 years at least. I mean, we have Terminator came out in 82. So yeah, 40 years.
Thanks, James Cameron.
That's what people, when people hear AI, they think Skynet, right? Because that's like the most popular idea of how AI works that's been inserted into our collective brains, right?
Well, I would like to propose something, because I think a lot of it has to do with maybe misunderstanding of what AI is. So some people think, I mean, AI for the longest time has been associated with artificial intelligence, and that's not really what's going on here. I would like to call it assistive intelligence, because it's helping you to do something, not like taking over the world and using Terminators to kill you. It's taking something that exists and enhancing it using models of data that have been accumulated and processing through them through the computer to give you the likely result that you asked for.
Yeah, and when one way that I've used AI, and I know like this is like the first thing that I really started hearing about when people talked about using AI for business in a generative way, is like, say you have a business plan, right? Or say you have a marketing plan, and that's written out, but you want to have some bullet points, some talking points for a presentation that you have to give the next day. You can say, hey, take this marketing plan and pull me 10 talking points from the marketing plan and a brief synopsis of those talking points so that I can deliver this presentation tomorrow. And by and large, you'll get what you need, right? Mm-hmm. So, we were talking at one point, about I want to do a true crime YouTube channel, and I've been a true crime aficionado or enthusiast or what. I don't like to say that I'm an enthusiast about people's murders, but
creeper.
Yeah, but I enjoy the true crime genre, and I want to do a channel. However, one thing about true crime is that doing anything that has any substance to it requires a certain amount of research, even if it's just to get the names, dates, times, and places right? However, if I'm already familiar with the case, right? If I'm conversant with a particular true crime case, I could then say to an AI, hey, give me the names, dates, places, people that are involved in a timeline of this person's crimes, right? And organize them in chronological order. Then I would have basically, a talking point script of like things that I wouldn't need to pull out of my brain or take all that time to like research and write down. So, I mean, that one thing that AI gives like people who are making content a real leg up on is there are multiple ways that you can make one piece of content and then use that piece of content as a jumping off point for entire other, areas. And it doesn't take one person all that time to do it. And so, yeah, I think that I'm anxious to see, like, Google is rolling out their, I always want to call it like Genosis or or like, what is it
Gemini.
called? Gemini.
Yeah,
Yes.
Project Gemini. So Gemini is basically the foundation, like general AI model that Google uses for
Right.
all a lot of stuff. They have three different versions of it. They have the Pro model. I think it's Pro model anyway, which is like the most advanced, and you can't do that on the phone. Then they have Gemini, and they have Gemini Nano. And Gemini Nano is what's rolled out or started to roll out to the Pixel 8 Pro series phones. As of right now, that AI model that they're using allows it works with smart replies with Gboard. I think WhatsApp, and it's going to move out to some other messaging apps, and
Right.
also it gives you summarization of when you use the Recorder app. The Recorder app, like where you have simultaneous recording, like people talking, all that stuff, it can label, and then it'll give you a summary, like of the
Right.
transcript. It'll do
Right.
that automatically for you.
Yeah. Which I think is very cool and has real practical applications that I think most people wouldn't think initially, like, okay, the practical application for this is something entirely different than what I've ever done before. However, it makes total sense as like a next step, right? And
Yes.
so I I'm anxious to see what Samsung comes up with, and of course, Apple's got Vision Pro, and see, Apple to this point hasn't like used the phrase AI
So
as
they have their what's it, Deep Fusion core is what they call it. I think that's what handles and processes their AI stuff.
yeah, yeah,
Are their neural processor is what they call it. I think they've got some
yeah,
different language. So like Samsung and Android has like the hexacore, Google has the tensor, um, and then Apple calls it the neural something.
yeah, neural,
Neural
yeah,
engine. That's what it
yeah,
is.
yeah. And so, I think the one thing that Apple hasn't done that is making what they're doing kind of fly under the radar a little bit more than like coming straight out and saying AI is like this neural engine is doing much of the same kind of stuff,
Mhm.
but it's Apple always wants to brand their stuff differently or whatever.
Well, AI for
Um,
them is going to be Apple Intelligence.
yeah, and I think that this neural engine technology and everything, one thing we wanted to talk about today, but I think we're going to run out of time. But maybe we can talk about.
We do Cliff's Notes version.
Yeah, I mean, people have been talking about Apple Vision Pro, which could be released as early as the end of this month, and people are talking about the cost, $3,500 straight off the button, which is a lot of money. I'm not going to say it's not a lot of money,
That's a lot of
but
dinero.
I think that when you take into account that Apple's basically creating an entirely new like computing platform,
Spatial
and
computing, sir.
yeah, and the hardware to go along with that, and then they're doing their, I mean, it has an M series. It has an M2 chip. At least that's what they said it was going to have before the M3 came out.
Yep.
It has an M2 chip inside, which has a neural engine. So a lot of what Apple's going to do with Vision Pro is going to be powered by this neural engine technology.
And the
And
M2 is a
without that, yeah,
very capable chipset.
yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that so much of so much of what is normal everyday computing right now for something like these A series chips is is just like a light workout.
Well, also, it's going to be interesting because the Vision Pro has two chips, so it has the M2 to handle all the computer based tasks, but there's a lot of sensors. There's like tons and tons of cameras on this thing. There's a lot of sensors on it. And what it does, it has, I believe it's called the R1 chip, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And that is to process all of the sensory data that is picked up by the machine when you're using it. So it's crazy that we've gotten to this point, because we started with the M1 chip a few years ago, and that was just kind of the beginning of Apple outfitting and just moving forward with their silicone. But because of that expertise that they developed, and then moving things down smaller, different nanometer sizes, and just keep getting better and better at it, opens up these applications.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's only going to get, I think what we get in Apple Vision Pro in 2024 in terms of the hardware is gonna be very rudimentary looking when compared to Apple Vision Pro in 2029, right?
Well, it's going to be cool, but it might be a little boring. And this is something we've ended up with a lot of platforms. Like whenever we got the first iPhone, like it had some cool new apps, but then it's like, all right, we got all the stuff that Apple put on here at day one, but it's going to take a little bit of time for the third-party stuff to catch up. Yeah. I mean, just look at the Quest. When we got the first Quest, there was like Beat Saber and like one other game, but it's kind of like, all right, we gotta wait a little bit. So I think there will be that initial, okay, here's what we have, but there's this, it's just going to get better with time from there.
I think there's also going to be a period of adjustment, to where you learn how to integrate what you do with this new way of interacting with the machine. And because talking about the Apple Lisa, or the original Mac, is a great sort of foil for this. The Apple Lisa cost $10,000 in 1983, which is $40,000 in 2024 money, and the Vision Pro cost $3,500. I mean, maybe
we see this with all new technology.
Yeah, we may see it may always cost $35,000 adjusted for whatever level of inflation, but the thing about the Apple Lisa or the first Macintosh is that, like, if you went back and tried to use one of those machines, it would feel to you like you were using a Texas Instruments calculator, right?
Yeah.
And it would feel so rudimentary by comparison. If you went back and tried to use the original iPhone now, it would feel so rudimentary by comparison. So what we're going to get with the Vision Pro is going to be a huge leap forward from where I think everybody, again, this is sort of like AI. People think goggles on your face and they think gaming VR, right?
Yes.
And gaming VR, I think, has always been the pairing, because using a virtual landscape like a game has always been a potentially good showcase for what VR could do.
Yeah.
But what Apple Vision Pro is going to do is it's going to take not something flashy like a game, but it's going to take like your everyday environment and lay itself over that environment, and then enhance what you can do in that environment while you're wearing the headset.
And there's two things that I want to talk about, and I've got a video I plan on making. One titled roughly, "The Apple Vision Pro is not for you," and that's okay, because it's not for everybody. It won't be for everybody on day one. We get it. You don't want to spend $3,500. We get it. You don't want to wear a headset. We get it. You don't care about spatial computing. That doesn't mean you need to crap on it. Like it's a new revolutionary technology, but it's not for everybody. It won't be in the, like, whenever that first iPhone came out, there were so many people that are like, I don't want that. Why would I want that? And now it's the most popular. It's the Cadillac of smartphones.
Yeah. Why would I want an iPod and a phone?
Yeah.
Right.
So there was that. And then two, the price. Yes, it's very expensive. I mean, I don't want to spend it. I mean, I'm just going to go up and visit Jason and go use his for a few days. He's going to buy it. But when it comes to technology, you can take a look back at this. So I like to use this illustration because whenever the flat panel TVs first came out, they were crazy expensive. I mean, they were like 10, 15 grand for like a 40-inch TV it was like 480p. Not 720, not 1080, not 1440,
right?
480. standard
Yeah.
definition. So I bought a Zenith 42-inch plasma, and I got this sucker. It was normally 3,000. I got it open box, clearance, floor model, like all these discounts,
Right.
and I still paid like $2,500 for this thing out the door. You can go get a 55-inch 4K LED TV for like $299 now.
Well, I mean, and I think we talked about this at another point. I got a 75-inch Hisense, like not their highest end model, but
It's the
the U
A7, A8.
it's the U7 is what I got. The U8 is their highest end model. I got a 75-inch U7 for $1,000.
They had the 85-inch, I think, A7 for $799 the
Yeah.
other day.
Yeah.
85-inch flat panel TV for $800.
Yeah. So and OLED prices have come down, and OLED was like the hot technology. So what we're seeing here is, some of it is iterative changes. And I think in tech for the last 5 or 6 or 7 years, we've had, a lot of iterative changes. But with AI and with spatial computing and that kind of thing, we're going to start to see again, like the next wave of really substantial change in how we interact with our devices. And we just can't see it yet.
And it will get more affordable.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that when you can have Vision Pro like in a contact lens, or you can have Vision Pro in like the Meta sunglasses, the Meta Ray-Bans.
Oh yeah, like you could be wearing those glasses you're wearing right now,
Yeah.
and we could be doing the podcast. You could be looking at the beach in Tahiti with a script that scrolls down that you could just read while we're talking, and then like I don't know, do something else at the same time. Look at the weather.
I responded to a tweet last night from Snazzy Labs, and I'm gonna try and find it here real quick. Okay. So his tweet was, Apple has been in the business of making devices for quote unquote everyone for the last 2 decades. Vision Pro is not that. The $17,000 rose gold Apple Watch or the $6,000 Mac Pro, except with the base model. So one day that everyone model will come, but not today, and that's okay. So I agree with him on a lot of fronts.
Just wait till we get the Apple Vision Pro, Apple Vision SE.
Yeah, I mean, so the last big leap forward in computing technology that Apple, January 24th is the 40th anniversary of the introduction of the Macintosh, and the iMac was released in January of 1998, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to see here in January 2024, 40 years after the Macintosh, the introduction of the Vision Pro.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that to me signals that Apple has bet the farm on this. They see Vision Pro as being the next logical paradigm shifting step in computing technology and how we interact with it. Now, whether or not that's the case is certainly up for question. And
yes.
And it is pricey in the same way that like the Mac Pro is pricey, right? But I think that much like the Mac Pro has little brothers and sisters in, MacBook Airs and et cetera, the Vision Pro will have the same kind of proliferation downward, so that
it just takes time. I mean, it's something where we're at the very outset of this, and they're only going to get more powerful. They're going to get more functional, and they're going to get more affordable. Now, how affordable that is underneath the umbrella of Apple is a big question mark because, I mean, we look at the regular iPhone. If you buy it unlocked, $829.
Right.
So, I mean, is it affordable? Well, it can be because you basically get one for free for any carrier if you like sign up for service or trade in a phone. But or you can do monthly payments, or there's always trade-ins to lower your financial liability. So Apple has been doing this game for a long time. I can only imagine that as we continue down this road and we get more mass adoption, we get more mass production, and we
Yeah.
get more affordability.
Well, the original iPhone, the 4 GB model that was the base model at the time, was $500, $499 retail.
And that came out in 2007?
2007, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's roughly $750 to $800 today money, right?
Okay, I was just looking that up.
Yeah. That's what I asked.
Way ahead of me.
That's what I asked contextually the other day to my Google last night when I was trying to figure this out, because I wanted to see, like, okay, so the economies of scale worked in some cases. Like, okay, the fact that you can buy an iPhone for what an iPhone basically cost in
15 years
2007
ago
is kind of interesting, and somebody brought it up to me as like a negative, right? So like, well, an iPhone still costs $800.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's like the iPhone, not the iPhone, 15 Pro Max, which starts at $1,250 or whatever it is now.
And that should tell you something. When you take a look at Apple's models and how they do pricing, their Pro models are always the most expensive. You look at the MacBooks, you look at the Air versus you look at the Pro. You look at the iPhone versus the iPhone Pro. Like the AirPods versus the AirPods Pro. They're just starting with the more premium advanced one. It's mostly geared towards developers and enthusiasts.
Yep.
And just day one adopters. And they're saying there's probably going to be like a 500,000 unit production run, which that tells me that it's going to be hard to get one. And if you can't get one on day one, you could be waiting quite a substantial amount of time before you can get one.
Yeah, and and I think one thing that is easy to miss as well is that they're starting with the best possible version of this that they can do. And the reason that they're doing that is because they don't have anything to build on. They can't take, like they did with the iPhone, the mobile phone market and the
create a Pro model
and then create like a model of their own from that. They created like a lot of this hardware, a lot of this software from scratch, right? And they're creating the best possible version of it that they can, because they don't have it. They can't like crib from the Quest, because the Quest is something entirely different.
Yep.
They can't crib from like an Oculus Rift or or like a Valve headset or something like that, because those are all slave devices, right?
Yep.
And this is not a slave device. This is a device that is its own computing device, separate and completely independent of anything else that it might connect to that's part of your walled garden of the ecosystem, right?
As Patrick Swayze would say, nobody puts the Apple Vision Pro in the corner.
That's right. Well, I've had the time of my life. Here.
that sounds like a transition to an ending.
Yes. Here on the Painfully Honest Tech Podcast, I've had the time of my life. That was perhaps the worst transition I've ever done.
You could make it worse in the future.
I could, but anyway, so CES next week, we'll see each other.
Face to face.
Yeah, I'm coming in on Monday, and late Monday, and then I'll be raring to go for Tuesdays. Exciting events.
I get there Sunday at lunchtime.
Okay, yeah, I've got the last minute company who's like, we'll pay for Jason's hotel room and give him X amount of money or whatever if he does like a short and 2 integrated ads for us. It's a toothbrush.
Oh, I got that email and it said toothbrush and I deleted it.
Well, my guy followed it through, and so yeah, we'll see, because I've already got a hotel booked. So now I have to figure out if I'm like gonna unbook myself or just keep the first night, because they can only give me their block of rooms for like Tuesday to Friday. And anyway,
currently we're staying at the same hotel, I believe.
Yes, the Luxor, the giant pyramid.
Dude, I love the Luxor. Everybody hates on me because they like to stay at the Mirage and the Aria. Like, man, I love the Luxor. Like, I like it. It's affordable. I like the layout, the design. I like the casino floor. I like the restaurants and stuff there. Like I've always just liked the Luxor since I was a kid.
Well, the only time I've ever spent any time at the Luxor, my brother-in-law got married there years and years ago, and I don't really remember a whole lot about it.
Well, I'm an expert, so stay with me,
Yeah,
kid, and you'll go far.
yeah. So anyway, we'll be in Vegas. We're gonna figure out a way to do an episode there. And other than that, thanks for stopping by here on another episode of the Painfully Honest Tech Podcast, where we talk about all the painfully honest stuff that we can possibly think of within an hour
I
and a
think it
half or
was
so.
I think it was painfully long today for some people, probably.
Yeah, maybe so. You can tell us in the comments. If you've listened for this long, tell us in the comments if we've been going on for too long.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for being here. Until the next time, my name's Jason. We got Adam over here, and this is the Painfully Honest Tech Podcast. The podcast so honest it hurts. Until the next time, we are out.